Okay, welcome back. Chapter 2, Criminology. This chapter is all about crime statistics, crime data, crime trends. Some of the things we're going to, sorry about that, include how we measure crime as criminologists. I'll show you how we do that here in just a second. Um, Come on. What are the strengths and weaknesses of the various data sources? Because crime data are reported a lot in the news, so you need to be good consumers. You need to understand when you see crime statistics, you need to understand what the strengths and the weaknesses of those statistics are, and you need to be able to critique them. You need to take well, okay, we see this is the murder rate for this city, but what does this really mean? Okay. What are the general characteristics of crime in the United States? So is crime been going up? Is crime going down? Are we living in safe times? Are we living in dangerous times? Which parts of the country are more dangerous than others, for example? And then the characteristics of people who are basically criminals. What are the gender differences in crime? What are their age and sex and race differences in crime, etc. All right, so let's start with our primary data sources for crime data sources. And the first one, or really two, there's two programs, but the first we'll talk about is called the Uniform Crime Report, or UCR. And then there's a follow-up study to it called NIBRS, and I'll show you what that is here in just a second. So UCR, the uniform stands for the Uniform Crime Report. This is the big data set. This is the one when you see statistics reported in the news. The FBI shows crime is going up by X% this year. These are the data they're talking about. So every year what happens is for over all 12 months, the police agencies, every police agency within a county will collect data. And whether it's the sheriff's office or the city police. So here in McLennan County, you'd have McLennan County Sheriff who would report data. And then you have the Waco Police Department who would report data. You also have smaller jurisdictions such as the Baylor Police. They're required to report data. The MART or police office or Belle Meade Police, whomever, whatever agency you're talking about, they're required, expected to fill out a uniform crime report sheet for each month and submit that to the state of Texas. Each of the 50 states has its own FBI officer who is in charge of producing all of these crime statistics for each state and submitting all of that information, collecting it all together and submitting it to the FBI. The FBI has a division which is located in a bunker in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And within that division, what they do is they write the Uniform Crime reports each year. They used to be a big volume of paper reports. Now it's all on the website. And if you want to check it out, just go to FBI.gov and scroll through it, and you'll see Uniform Crime Reports. It's probably their most popular website link. And it has data for every year. I've been doing the UCR since the 1930s. So they have data pretty much for every year on crime since then, up until this past year. Currently available is 2018. We'll look at some of those data in a minute. All right, so the UCR has two major categories of offenses, and we call these Part 1 and Part 2. We're going to focus primarily on these. So Part 1 offenses are really sort of, kind of the big ones. These include the 8 crimes that are the most common crimes, and also the ones for which we've been collecting data for every year. They include two broad categories. One is crimes against person, which we also call violent crimes. These include criminal homicide, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Okay, so those are the 4 violent crimes UCR reports: criminal homicide, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. So if a police officer gets a report of an aggravated assault, and they'll take it, they'll write it down, and then they will go back and hand it to somebody in the police office. Will then be required to categorize what type of crime that is based on the FBI's definition. Okay. The second type are crimes against property, and these are more common than crimes against person. These include burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and then the fourth one you may not be able to see because my lovely face is right here in the corner, is arson. Okay? Arson. All right. Collectively, these 8 crimes are referred to as index crimes, and these are the major crimes that all criminologists study. The most major of the crimes we study is homicide. That's the big one. Part 2 offenses include all other kinds of issues. They include a lot of white-collar crime. They include a lot of what we call crimes against the moral order. You recall from last chapter, that includes things like gambling, prostitution, illicit drug use. There are lots of crimes within Part 2, but the data on these really aren't as good or as exhaustive as they are on the index crimes. All right. We just don't use them very much in our research. Okay. When we talk about uniform crime reports, we use rates. There are 2 types of data you have. One is just the absolute number of crimes. But the absolute number of crimes really isn't that useful unless you understand the size of the population to which the crimes are being referenced. And so that's why we use rates. So in order to calculate a crime rate, we do the following. We take the number of crimes divided by the population of whatever jurisdiction we're talking about, whether it be a city or a county or a state or even a country, and then we multiply that factor by 100,000, and it gives us the crime rate per 100,000 population. It allows us to compare cities to each other, which we do. It allows us to compare states to each other, which we do. And it allows us to track the crime rate over time for the whole nation, which we're going to do here in just a second. All right. Rates versus raw numbers. Let me give you an example of why this is important. So what's the most dangerous city in the United States? Most people will tell you that it's Chicago. Chicago has a reputation for being, particularly the south side of Chicago, has a reputation for being a very high crime area. Lots of murders. We'll see stories about 56 people were killed in Chicago this weekend or whatever. It does have it is a pretty dangerous city. It does have a very high crime rate. In the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago have pretty high murder rates. But they're far from the most dangerous city in the United States. So let's just take a look here. Here are 3 cities. We have, I want to try and use my little pen here. We have New Orleans. Okay. We have Chicago. And we have Philadelphia. So in 2018, New Orleans had 167 murders. Chicago had 561 murders, and Philadelphia had 351 murders, okay? So you'd look at these 3 numbers and go, okay, well, what's the most dangerous city? Well, you'd probably immediately say, well, 561 people were murdered in Chicago. I don't want to go there. I don't want to get murdered. Therefore, it must be the most dangerous city. Well, if we were just looking at the absolute number of murders, you would be correct. But we're really not interested in that. What we're interested in is the rate of murders, because rate gives us an idea of risk. Out of the number of people living in a place, what is your risk of being murdered? Okay? So let's take a look at this. If we do something else, if we now bring in the populations of the cities, and we see here New Orleans has less than 500,000 people living in it. It has a very low population. It's frankly it's not even 3 times bigger than Waco, give or take. Chicago has a very large city. Over 2.5 million people live there, and Philadelphia has over 1.5 million people living in it. So looking at the populations of the city, Chicago has the highest number of murders, but it also has the largest population. Okay. Now let's combine all of this information together using that formula I showed you just a few minutes ago. Take the number of crimes divided by the population times 100,000. And let's just take New Orleans. So the great city of New Orleans had 167 murders that year, but it only has a population of 391,000 people. That gives it a murder rate of, oh God, that was ugly, 42.7. So that means 42.7 people, murders occurred for every 100,000 people who live in New Orleans. All right, is that high? Is that low? I don't know. Let's compare it to the other two cities and see. When we compare New Orleans' murder rate of 42.7 to the murder rate of Chicago, which is 20.7, or the murder rate of Philadelphia, which is 22.1, the murder rate for New Orleans is twice that of Chicago. So while there are absolutely more murders in Chicago, and we get the stories on the news about Chicago murders and the documentaries made about the neighborhoods in the south and west side of Chicago and the TV shows about Chicago, your risk of being murdered is twice as great in New Orleans than it is in Chicago. By looking at rates, it allows us to standardize crime by size of population. And then it allows us to compare cities. Chicago and Philadelphia have about the same murder rate. Very little difference. New Orleans has almost twice the rate of Philadelphia and more than twice the rate of Chicago. That's why we use rates and not raw numbers of crime. All right, let's take a look at some crimes over the last over the last 20 years. So I know you can't see it because of the video, but this right here is 2018. Okay, this is 1999, and this is the crime rate, property crimes for the entire country of the United States. And what we've seen since 1999 to 2018 is a 41% decrease in the crime rate. Okay, so property crime, according to the Uniform Crime Report, FBI data, has gone down by 41%. That's good, right? I think so. It's better than going up by 41%, that's for sure. Let's look at violent crime. Well, we see that in 1999, we had a violent crime rate of over 500 per 100,000. And by 2018, we had a violent crime rate that had dropped to less than 400. And what we had between 1999 and 2018 is a 29% decrease in the violent crime rate. So if people ask you, is crime going up? Is crime going down? Or if they ask you the more general question, is life more dangerous today than it used to be 20 years ago? The answer is, well, according to these data, no. In fact, the crime rate has been going down pretty steadily, both for crimes against persons and crimes against property. It's been going down pretty steadily over the last 20 years. That's good. And later on in this semester, we're going to talk about what are some of the reasons why we've seen a decrease in the crime rate. All right, let's keep going. We're not finished with the crime stuff. Let's look at motor vehicle thefts. Motor vehicle thefts are a very reliable indicator of crime. And the reason why is that when people have their car stolen, it's a heavy investment. So my wife and I are thinking about buying an RV, a fifth wheel. And we're looking at a truck, a diesel truck to pull this fifth wheel. And I've been pricing them. And the sticker price on a like a Ford F-250 with a diesel 4-wheel drive, or a Dodge Ram 2500 with the 4-wheel drive, or a Silverado 2500 4-wheel drive, roughly around $70,000 sticker price. Okay, I paid $65,000 for my first house, and so I sit there and I look at that truck and I'm like, $70,000 or $75,000 for this Silverado, because it has this really cool backup camera that we're going to need. Wow, that's a lot of money, right? Cars are expensive. So if somebody steals your car, you're going to report it. So motor vehicle theft data are very reliable because there's insurance involved. And when a vehicle gets stolen, there's also the state monitors and regulates every vehicle, right? Because you have to have it licensed and registered through the state. Whichever state you're on, they're going to put, license plates on your car. That's how they keep track of them. Your cars have VIN numbers. It's a very complicated and well done system to track cars, and when one is stolen, that gets reported, and so the data are very reliable. So what we can see from here is that from 1999, we had a very high rate of vehicle theft, and then today the vehicle theft has dropped quite a bit. It's really down almost half, about a 46% decrease in the last 20 years. Now, why is that? Some of that is because, as you can see, we still had a pretty high level of vehicle theft up until about 2008. And those data look a little different than the property data we saw 2 slides ago. So one of the reasons why is that cars are just becoming much tougher to steal. Okay, the protection devices and the way that ignitions work, etc., it's harder to steal cars now. And they all have onboard systems now, right? Every new car today has some sort of onboard system that frankly make cars, if they're stolen, pretty easy to track through geocoded satellites, etc. So car theft is one reason why it's going down. Is because it's easier to get caught and the risks are much higher. So people are stealing less cars. Oh, they're still stealing. They're stealing less cars. So let's keep going. Yeah, the crime doesn't. Or go back. Sorry. Sorry about that. So we talked a little earlier about public data and at the county level. The second is that, and the big one, many crimes don't go reported, particularly property crimes. People either don't want to get the police involved. They don't want to get, they don't want to file an insurance claim unless it's a huge loss. Aggravated assault often doesn't go reported because people feel like, two drunks getting a fight out in the parking lot of a bar. Are they going to call the police? No, they're probably going to want to get out of there because they're both probably going to be legally culpable in some way. So lots of crime doesn't go reported. And we know that because of something we'll talk about here in just a second. Third, the FBI uses something called the hierarchy rule, which is something we hate. But the FBI, as criminologists, we hate it. But the FBI doesn't care what we really think. They're just more interested in the standardized way of counting crimes. What is the hierarchy rule? Well, what it does is it rates offenses by the most severe crime. And so let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say I break into a house. That's an act of burglary. Let's say somebody is home, and I didn't know they were home, and in the process of trying to steal their television, we get into a fight, and I hit them with a club, let's say a baseball bat, and that person winds up going to the hospital. That's aggravated assault. So there are 2 crimes there. There's the burglary, and then there's the aggravated assault. When it comes time to fill out the paperwork, the FBI ranks all violent crimes as more severe than property crimes, except motor vehicle theft. So the burglary won't get counted, but the aggravated assault will get counted. So over the course of, and let's be honest, most crimes don't happen in a vacuum, right? When there's an aggravated assault, there's usually something else going on, whether it's a burglary, or it might possibly even be worse, like a rape. There's something else going on. And so that aggravated assault, in my case, where I broke into the house, the burglary, tried to steal a television, guy wakes up, I grab a baseball bat, I club him in the head, and I book it out of there. When the police report that crime, the UCR is only going to pick up the aggravated assault because the aggravated assault has a higher severity level than burglary does. Now, let's say I broke into the house, and he and his wife were there, and I was trying a burglary. I get the club, I hit the guy over the head, and then I hit the wife, but only hit her in the leg or something, okay? So I attacked the wife with the club as well. She doesn't die, but the husband does die because I hit him in the head, and he died from his injuries. So now we have manslaughter, we have aggravated assault, me clubbing the woman with the bat, and we still have the burglary. So those are 3 crimes, but what's going to happen is when UCR gets the data, they're just going to pick the most severe, and the most severe in that case will be the manslaughter or the murder. Okay? So what does that mean? That means with the system we have, those data I showed you a few minutes ago,
In crimes where there's 2 or more incidents involved, only one of those is going to get picked up. And the one that's going to get picked up is the most severe incident that happens, the murder in the last case I just suggested. All right, so that's called the hierarchy rule. And what that does was it artificially lowers the crime rate. It also doesn't take into account differences in policing. And we know that police activity has a large impact on crime, what's reported, who's caught for criminal activity. There's a great show on Netflix called Flint Town, and it's about Flint, Michigan, and it's how at one point this poor town of about the size of Waco only had 3 working police cars. They're just broke. They have no money. And so they were trying to get more money from the mayor's office, and so they decided to form a task force. And they built a task force of 8 of their best officers, and they told them, you go out and you sweep up every criminal you can find, because we need to show the mayor that we have a crime problem in this town and that we are on it and we need more resources. And so that's what the task force did. They went out night after night, hit all the spots they knew where criminals were hanging out, went to all the bad neighborhoods, rounded up and arrested as many people as they could. And they did that because they wanted to drive up the number of arrests, and also at the same time they were driving up the crime rate. So differential targeting by police can affect to what extent the crime rate varies by neighborhood and also by city. And lastly, I report this again, we have some of the other weaknesses. The data are highly aggregated, and there are no incident level reports. So, but we're going to talk about that here in just a second. All right, let's move to another piece of data I want to talk about. So we talked about the violent crime and property crime have been going down. Remember I showed you the decreases, like 29% drop in violent crime, 40-some% drop in property crime. But look at this guy right here. This is the murder rate from 1999 to today. Well, not 2018, so 20 years later. And if you look at this line, I mean, we had a slight decline, but for the most part, the murder rate hasn't changed a lot in the last 20 years. And this is disturbing because murder is our most reliable data source. So when we talk about crime, what's the most reliable crime statistic we have? It's murder. The second most reliable statistic is motor vehicle theft. Everything else is subject to all the problems I talked about in the previous slide. Underreporting, hierarchy rule, police targeting, etc. But murder is not. One reason why murder is not is that murder is the most reliable data we have because of this concept of corpus delicti. So why has the murder rate not changed since 1999? There are 3 reasons I want to talk about here. Number one, it might be that we're completely wrong about the drop in the other crimes. We know that murder has stayed pretty steady from 1999 to 2018. Hadn't changed much. We also know that property crime has gone down quite a bit, and reported violent crime has gone down quite a bit. Are we having less crime, or are we having less reported crime? The murder rate would indicate the latter. The murder rate would indicate that we're having less reported crime. Murders still get reported, but the other crimes are getting reported at a lower rate. Okay, that's one reason why. Second reason why is back to police resources. Police departments have budgets. They have budget issues. They have priority. Police aren't there to write reports about UCR. Police are there to protect and serve, right? We could have the same level of crime, but police just don't have time to do all. The UCR program is pretty voluntary. And so police may not have time to sit down and fill out all the reports they need to. And in fact, we know this to be the case, particularly in rural police jurisdictions. They don't have the people working in the office sometimes to fill out these kinds of reports every month. And also the tight budget issue may mean that, there's just less ability to get out there and stop the crimes that are going on and to take reports on the crimes that are going on. So it could be a police resource issue. That's the reason why murder is staying level, because there's always the murder data are never going to change. There's never going to be a fault in the murder data because of this concept of corpus delicti. If you have a body, a corpse, then you've got a murder, and it has to be reported. Maybe the third reason is that murder is special. Maybe murder follows a different track when it comes to crime. Maybe people murder for different reasons than they break into houses or commit aggravated assault or, other crimes we're talking about here. Larceny, theft, for example. And I think there's something, we're going to do a whole chapter on murder, and I think there is something to be said for this. We do know, just as a preview, that about 60% of murders are happen between people who know each other. These aren't stranger events. Whereas when we talk about other types of crimes, oftentimes burglary is not an acquaintance thing. It's, somebody staking out a house of a stranger, breaking in to get some stuff. Okay, so maybe murder is special. Or maybe all of the above is true. Maybe every single one of these reasons applies in a small section. Maybe less crime is being reported, but in fact, crime is still pretty much a problem. We know murder hadn't changed much. Maybe police just don't have the resources to fight the non-murder crimes. And that's why the reports they're giving to the UCR have been showing fewer assaults, fewer larcenies, but they're still showing the same level of murder. And maybe murder is special. And I think the case can be made for that. Maybe murder doesn't follow the rules, and put these in air quotes, because crime has rules like all social behavior does. Maybe murder is a little special. Maybe the reasons why people commit homicides aren't the same reasons why people commit the other crimes we just talked about. All right, we're going to stop there and then pick up in video 2 for chapter 2 after this.